Well, good afternoon. It's Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. And welcome to the Tuesday edition, therefore, of Just Parlays with Chris King. Of course, I'm your host, Chris King, because as you see, there's nobody else here. If there was, well, maybe we would introduce them, but you never know. Got a lot to talk about today. It's the next to last day of the regular season for Major League Baseball. Not a whole lot left at stake after yesterday's results, so it'll kind of make for interesting games going forward today and tomorrow. We also can talk about the Monday night game, which was kind of disappointing from the perspective of what happened to the Los Angeles Rams. Did absolutely nothing yesterday, couldn't find the end zone. They kind of reverted to the way they played in week one against the Bills. Their offensive line was a sieve. Matthew Stafford got knocked senseless. And the 49ers pretty much dominated that game from start to finish. So we've got the baseball playoffs coming up later this week. We've got the first couple games of the NHL season coming up this week as well. And of course, there's the one college football game tomorrow. It'll be a kind of a boring day Thursday when you get right down to it, because all there is really is what? Preseason hockey? I mean, there won't be any, and we'll have the Thursday night game, of course, but there won't be any baseball Thursday because the playoffs will start with the wild card round, I believe, on Friday, which will be interesting to see how that unfolds. But yeah, no baseball Thursday, no college football that I'm aware of scheduled for Thursday. I'm just going to double check my schedule here real quick and see. Nope, we've got the one game tomorrow with SMU and UCF that, of course, rescheduled from last week due to Hurricane Ian. Then we got 4 games on Friday. So, yeah, going to be a pretty quiet day on Thursday. Yeah, preseason hoops, Andrew, on as well. Though it's always tough to try and deal with preseason because you don't know who's going to play and you don't know how long they're going to play. And, you see a lot of these younger guys that are probably going to be the, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys on the bench or, playing down in the G League. So it makes it a little tougher to try and figure out what each team's going to do in preseason. I see you got the Pistons and the Knicks tonight, the Heat and the Timberwolves, the Pelicans and the Bulls, and the new look Utah Jazz against the we're kind of here Portland Trailblazers. As you can tell, that game not really in high demand because you can get tickets for as low as $2. That's right, $2. So if you're looking for cheap entertainment and you live in Rip City, head on down to the Moda Center and watch the retooling Jazz take on the retooling Blazers. It'll cost you more to park than it'll cost you to buy a seat for that contest. We're less than 2 weeks, is it, till the NBA season kicks off? I want to say it's the 18th or the 19th, somewhere right around there. The days all kind of run together after a while. So we're not that far away from that. We're less than a week, right around a week, I guess, when everybody gets in full swing in the NHL. And, college basketball, not that far away either. We just talk about how, it just turned into October, the college basketball season just around the corner. Opening day for that is slated to be November 7th. So just over a month away from the start of college hoops. It'll be good stuff going on there. Of course, we have a lot of fun with college basketball, especially with all the, smaller conferences. Because the lines are a lot fuzzier, for lack of better terminology, than they are in some of the big conferences. And of course, we'll have a lot of teams moving around in college basketball this year. Seen a lot, 26 different schools are going to switch conferences from last season to this season. A few of those are going to move up from D2. Texas A&M Commerce and Stonehill and Southern Indiana and Queens and Lindenwood all moving up from D2 to take part. Let's see. 3 of them will be in the Ohio Valley. That'll be Lindenwood, Southern Indiana. Okay, did I misread it? Oh, I'm sorry. Little Rock is moving from the Sun Belt to the Ohio Valley. So that'll be an interesting fleshing out of that conference. Southern Indiana will be in the Ohio Valley. Queens will go to the Atlantic Sun. Stonehill will be in the Northeast Conference. Texas A&M Commerce will be in the Southland. A lot of teams leaving the Ohio Valley. Belmont is going to the Missouri Valley Conference there. Austin Peay is going to the A-Sun. Loyola of Chicago is going to go to the A-10. That's a good get for the A-10. Bringing in a team that's had some success. Conference USA is constantly shuffling teams because they don't have anything else to do. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic in that conference. But yeah, so we're just about a month away from that, and we'll definitely have to look more into that probably later in the month, talking about some of these other, some of the smaller or some of the bigger conferences and things like that. Talking about who's around, who's gone, and things like that. We're just looking here, the NIT is not going to be played in New York City next year. The final rounds will be in Vegas this year, and next year they'll be in Indianapolis at the Hinkle Fieldhouse, the home of Butler. And I know that everybody's going to be very disappointed by this, especially our good buddy John, who I haven't seen lately in the chat. But in breaking news, well, it's not really breaking now, but it came out over the summer. After in 2024, IUPUI, everybody's favorite doormat and, who everybody loves to fade when it comes to college hoops, will be dissolved. That school will be replaced by separate Indiana University and Purdue University affiliated institutions. The IUPUI program will transfer to the new IU Indianapolis school. So I'm not sure if that's what if they're just going to call it IU Indianapolis as opposed to IUPUI or what, but I'm sure that a lot of people will be disappointed that we won't be able to talk about the Jaguars, at least not in the format of IUPUI. Whether it be IU Indianapolis, whether they're just going to call themselves IUI, they haven't said to this point in time, other than the fact that, like I said, it'll transfer to all the teams will transfer to the Indiana University of Indianapolis. They'll still stay in the Horizon League, so at least you'll still have a doormat there. But yep, that's some interesting news. Just read that moments ago. Well, like I said, James, you don't have to worry. They're still going to exist. They just won't be known as IUPUI after 2020. I don't know if it'll be after the 2023-24 season in time for 2024-2025 or not, but they won't be the IUPUI Jaguars. They're apparently going to be the IU Indianapolis Jaguars. Nothing like making the name even worse to try and write out. Is stupid enough when you had to type out IUPUI all the time when you'd be talking about games. Now you have to type out IU Indianapolis. But yeah, the unders with them, I'm sure they'll be just as good. You can probably take the under. They'll probably run unders on number of points versus the number of letters in Indiana University of Indianapolis. And it would probably be a push because, obviously there's a truckload of letters in Indiana University of Indianapolis. But like I said, they'll still be in the Horizon League. They'll still get beat up by, the Oaklands and the Wright States and things like that. But like I said, only a month away, so we're not that far off. I know everybody gets excited when we get around to college hoop season, especially early on when you get all the random tournaments. You get the Maui Invitational, and you get the Battle for Atlantis, and you get all the 372 different ESPN events from random places in the middle of nowhere where you're like, I didn't even know they had a basketball court there. And you see a bunch of teams and you're like, well, this is probably the only time I'll ever see these teams on TV because, you've never heard of half the schools. But yeah, that's always an exciting time. I remember back in the old days when, it was the preseason NIT and you'd have like the Great Alaska Shootout and the Maui Invitational, and that was about it. And now it's like everybody and their third cousin has an invitational tournament where they try to invite all these teams just so they can, try and draw up a bunch of money. Yeah, it's very early to try and do stuff. I've been doing some research. Obviously, Ken Palm is always a great place to start when you're trying to get information about hoops. Pomeroy does a great job breaking down all that stuff. And, when you're looking at lines, one of the places you should always look, at least that I do, is check out Hoops Peterson. He's with Vision, but he puts up his own lines for every game of relevance the night before, so you can compare them with the lines that are out there, and it gives you another perspective. Hoops does a lot of research, and Reichel could testify to that. He's interacted with Hoops a few times on Vision, and Hoops is a great guy. Between him and Pomeroy, you can learn a lot about college basketball without having to overload your brain by going to 372 different sites. Andrew saying the Knicks versus Pistons, 209.5 tonight, too high. That's a problem with preseason. Is you don't know, how these teams are going to play it. I mean, it's a little better than football, because you don't have to worry about seeing the 17th string water boy playing because you've only got so many spots on a NBA roster. But that total has come down. It started at 214, so. But yeah, you're looking at a Knicks team. They're still trying to figure out their way, after the offseason with getting Brunson. And, they won't have Quentin Grimes tonight. He's out with a foot injury. The Pistons, still the Pistons are the Pistons. They got a lot of young guys, Cunningham and Ivy and all those guys. They did get Bogdanovich from the Jazz. It's a good pickup for them. Like I said, I'm not big on trying to handicap preseason because there's so many variables that it makes it difficult to try and get an accurate read on what to expect from these teams because every coach is different. Dwayne Casey's going to look at the preseason differently than Thibodeau, who's going to look at it differently than Eric Spoelstra, who's going to look at it differently than somebody like Joe Mazzulla now, who took over the Boston job with the suspension of Udoka. So it makes it kind of difficult because you don't know how these teams are going to look. You don't know how long they're going to play their big guys, or if you're going to see some of the veterans at all. But at least it's an option out there, I guess. Same with preseason hockey. Well, I know Tibbs is an old dinosaur, but I'm not going to take that away from him. So is Spoelstra, he's been around forever. And some of these teams, have a lot of veterans that they don't necessarily need to ramp up as much as some of these younger teams where you're trying to figure out who's going to fit where. Like Utah's got a bunch of young guys and 372 first-round draft picks over the next 6 years that they'll try to do something with. But, they've got a new coach after Snyder left, and they might look at preseason a little differently than, say, Billy Donovan will with the Bulls, because he's got a little bit more of an established roster. Or, like I said, Spoelstra has a very established roster in Miami. So it all depends on how you look at it. Looking back to baseball last night, we saw the Phillies have now officially clinched a wild card spot after, playing hot potato with it for the better part of the last couple of weeks. They managed to beat Houston yesterday 3-0. Meanwhile, even though Milwaukee rallied to win, they are now out of the postseason. Couldn't happen to a better team. I feel the only person I feel bad for in that organization is Bob Uecker. I'm not a big Brewers fan. Never have been. Didn't like them when they were in the American League. Like them less when now they're in the National League. They tried to get by too much with their starting rotation, and then their rotation had injury issues. They couldn't hit. They still can't hit. They've been fortuitous a bunch of times getting by on miscues by the opposition, and it finally caught up to them. And now they'll be playing golf in a couple days. In the one game that's going on right now, the first game of a doubleheader between the Yankees and the Rangers at Globe Life Field, the Yankees up 1-0 in the bottom of the first. The Yankees did get a homer in the first inning, but it did not come off the bat of Aaron Judge. It was Cabrera, his sixth of the season since coming up. So Yankees won, Rangers nothing, batting in the bottom of the first. John Gray and Jameson Taillon going in that one. In the nightcap, it'll be Garrett Cole against my personal favorite starting pitcher, TBD. That's right. The Rangers are so bad, they can't even figure out just a few hours before game time who they might pitch in the nightcap. But, hey, that's the Rangers in a nutshell. They've lost 6 in a row, 9 of 10 going into this game here. They're 66-93. They did make some good acquisitions, getting some bats, bringing in Seager and Semien. But until they get some pitching, Texas is probably going to continue to flounder near the bottom of the AL West. What else did we see last night in baseball? The Yankees had nothing to play for. So, of course, Severino goes out and throws 7 no-hit innings, and they win 3-1. The Mets were rained out against Washington. They'll play a doubleheader today. Perhaps the rain out was good for the Mets because Atlanta did not score against the Marlins. Really good performance by Jesus Luzardo. Snapped a string of 9 straight losses by the Marlins in his outings in that one. And the Marlins actually scored more than 2 runs. So that was cause for celebration. They probably should give away free tacos or something. The Blue Jays beat the Orioles 5-1. Game shortened by rain to 8 innings. Tampa Bay blew a 3-0 lead. They've replaced Glasnow after 3 2/3. Brought in Herget to make his season debut, and he turned it into a 4-3 loss. The only thing that saved Tampa Bay from being locked into that spot where they'd have to play Cleveland in the opening round is that Seattle forgot that they were supposed to actually beat Detroit. They lost 4-3, had a tying run on base in scoring position in the 9th, and Carlos Santana did what he usually does and struck out swinging to end the ball game. Seattle still holds a 1.5 game lead over the Rays for that 5th spot in the playoff picture. Tampa Bay has 2 games left. Seattle has 3, I'm sorry, because they play a doubleheader today. Tampa Bay has to win their last 2. Seattle has to go 1-2 for Tampa Bay to have a shot. Or, if Tampa Bay wins 1 and Seattle loses all 3 of theirs, that would give Tampa Bay the upper hand due to the tiebreaker from the season series, as the Rays won the season series from the Mariners. I believe it was 5-2. Just going to pull that up here real quick. Yeah, 5-2. So since there are no tiebreaker games this season, it's decided by season series. That's where Tampa Bay sits, and that's where the Mariners sit here. Toronto obviously clinched their spot as far as having home field advantage in the postseason after yesterday's performances. Duke and Georgia Tech. Yeah, Duke favored only by 3. I'll give Georgia Tech credit. They actually played pretty well last week. Of course, it helped that Abin Candy got hurt for Pitt, and they went to Vincent Davis. And while Davis was effective running the ball, he also fumbled the ball a couple times. And then after Pitt scored to make it a 1-score game late, they couldn't tackle. I mean, the guy bounced off one guy and then ran for like 60 yards down the sideline before you finally bumped him out of bounds. I do think it's an overreaction. We just watched Duke curb stop Virginia last week. I know everybody talks about, well, Duke's a basketball school. Well, every once in a blue moon, Duke has a decent football team. And I know some of it's chalked up to the fact that the competition they played, because, they did lose to Kansas. And I get the fact that this game is at Bobby Dodd Stadium in Atlanta. But come on, it's Georgia Tech. They're still trying to adjust from one offensive style to the other. Sims still is not a great quarterback when it comes to throwing the ball. You look at the 4 games before they fired their coach, they got beat by 31 by Clemson. They beat Western Carolina. Whoop-de-doo. I could get a bunch of high school kids that could beat them. They got thrashed by Ole Miss at home 42-0, and then they lost at Central Florida. Sure, they went on the road. They beat Pitt. Woohoo. Congratulations. Pitt is one of the most overrated, inconsistent teams there is in college football. Everybody gets hyped up about them. They were hyped up that they got Slovis to replace Pickett. And Slovis has looked pedestrian. He just doesn't get it done. He doesn't move the chains. He makes dumb decisions sometimes. Sure, he threw for 300 yards last week and 3 touchdowns, but how much of it came in garbage time? Because, they were behind the whole friggin' game. They were up 7-6 at the half, but then they were down 9-7 after 3 quarters. Then it was 12-7. Then they fumbled. You look at Pitt's second half drives, fumble, punt, interception, fumble, punt before they scored on their last 2 drives. And by that point, they were already down double digits. So when the game was in striking distance, you turned it over 3 times and you punted twice. Duke is not a bad football team, which is strange to say. They blanked Temple to open the season. They beat Northwestern on the road. I know everybody's like, well, it's Northwestern. Who cares? That's true. Northwestern's not a great team. Pat Fitzgerald needs some more talent. They whipped NC A&T, which you would expect. They hung tough against Kansas. And we talked about Kansas last week about how, they're a 5-0 team now. And you get to get College game day there for the first time ever in Lawrence this weekend. But, Duke held their own in that contest. And then they came out and they beat the doors off of Virginia. And, everybody's going to talk about, well, Virginia's not very good. Well, nobody said they were. But, Virginia gave Syracuse everything they wanted 2 weeks ago, too. I think that Leonard can have a good game for Duke under center. I think they can run the ball on this Georgia Tech team. Coleman and even Leonard has the capability of running. He had 59 yards and 2 scores in that win over Virginia on the ground. And they've got a good receiver in Calhoun that can stretch the field as well. I think that it's the fact that the game's at Bobby Dodd and everybody's excited that, look, Georgia Tech beat a ranked team. That's why the line's only 3. I'd still take Duke. I'd take Duke if the line was 6. I just don't trust Georgia Tech. Your parlay is not horrible, Gio. My one concern, of course, with the Dodgers and the Astros, like everybody, like you were talking about the other day, you've got to look and see who's in the lineup and who's not. It's Urias and Feltner in the Dodgers game. Urias has been lights out since mid-June. Feltner, not great. The Astros, it's Suarez and Verlander. My only question is who's going to be in the lineup for either one of those teams. Now, Philadelphia knows they're going to the playoffs. So, I mean, on the plus side, kudos to them. It's the first time since 2011 that they made the postseason. On the flip side, can they afford to take their foot off the brake and say, well, we're not going to play Harper and Real Muto and Schwarber and Hoskins with the way things are going? I like the Rays. I like Jeffrey Springs over Rich Hill, and I also like the Nerfy with Milwaukee and Arizona. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see guys like McCutchen and Yelich for Milwaukee tonight since they're eliminated. And let's face it, since the All-Star break, Gallen's been the best pitcher in the majors, a 127 earned run average since the break. Milwaukee's not a great hitting team anyway. And Eric Lauer's not bad. So I think and Arizona's not a great hitting team either. So I see asking, do I think the Bills cover 13.5? Well, Kenny Pickett's going to make his first career start. So there's that. Pittsburgh's defense hasn't been all that great. I mean, come on, they just gave up 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to the Jets. And let's face it, Zach Wilson is not Josh Allen. I know that Pittsburgh beat Buffalo last year in week 1, basically on the basis of a couple turnovers and a blocked punt that they ran back for a score. They don't have TJ Watt. The Steelers couldn't beat New England. They only beat Cincinnati because they managed to force 5 turnovers, including a pick 6. And then they still had to survive a missed extra point and a missed field goal in overtime before they beat them. Like I said, they lost to the Jets. They lost to Cleveland. They're not very good. I don't understand. If you were going to make the move to Pickett, either do it at the beginning of the season or do it later in the season, because you look at what Pittsburgh's got coming up in their schedule in the next month. And it's not pretty. You're talking about a team that's 1-3. You've got to play Buffalo on the road. You play Tampa Bay at home. You go to Miami, and then you play Philadelphia on the road. That is not a good stretch. You're basically staring strongly in the face of 1-7, maybe 2-6 at the bye. And at that point, you probably could have gone to Pickett. But, I mean, all this talk last week when they lost to Cleveland about how you weren't considering making a change and you were going to stick with Trubisky, and that lasted all of a half after that game. Pittsburgh's a desperate football team. The problem is being a desperate football team against a good football team doesn't usually work in your favor. And, you know, when you look at blowout games, there aren't very many teams in the league that are as good at blowing teams out as Buffalo is. You look in their last 12 as a double-digit favorite. They've actually gone 8-2-2 against the spread. So playing at home, after that win over Baltimore, they're supposedly, and this is early in the week, so of course you'll have to check back as the week progresses. Ed Oliver could be back this week. Jordan Phillips could be back this week. So you're bolstering that defensive line again. They shut down Baltimore in the second half of that game last week. And Pittsburgh, let's face it, Pittsburgh is not Baltimore when it comes to being able to move the ball. I think they win that one fairly comfortably. Josh, glad to see that you love emojis. Now you can enjoy a timeout. Virginia Tech getting 14.5 versus Pitt. Not a whole lot to say about that one. Like we said, Pitt's not great. The problem is Virginia Tech isn't great either. We've talked about them a few times as far as that goes. I'll have to take a deeper look into that one in the next day or so and see what I think about it. I don't like Grant Wells. Reichel didn't like Grant Wells, and he made it abundantly clear how much he hates Grant Wells as a quarterback. I'm just not sold on Pitt either. Let's see. Didn't I get this guy? Didn't I block him already? There we go. I just had to go through and apparently block all the rest of his stupid emojis. I thought normally I took them all out. But yeah, Big X, Reichel is he pops in occasionally. The fun thing about it is that we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that the powers that be made the decision to make it where I was the only one on, which is difficult for me because then I had to sit here and talk for an hour. I don't get to sit around and take a break and listen to other stuff. But hopefully they'll readjust and bring him back or bring somebody back, whether it's Jim or Steen or Reichel or May Terry Bradshaw. Oh, look, here's another one I get to block. Bye. So apparently we've got some random people that just want to put up emojis. Good for them. I don't have the patience for that. Safe wins parlay for the week. The Chiefs on the money line, the Packers on the money line, the Jags on the money line, and the Dolphins -3. Let's see. The Chiefs are playing the Raiders on Monday night. The Raiders have not had them. Jacksonville gets Houston. Probably a safe call there. The Dolphins -3 over the Jets. Yeah, at least, even without Tagovailoa, you've got a capable quarterback in Bridgewater that, has been around the league and can keep in the game. And then the other one, the Packers on the money line. Who do the Packers have this week? Oh, is that the game in London? Yeah, against the Giants, who we don't know who's going to play quarterback. Could be Daniel Jones. Could be Tyrod Taylor. Could be Davis Webb. Could be Y.A. Tittle. Maybe they'll get Phil Simms. Well, don't get me wrong, Big X. We thought it was a good idea too, but they want to make sure that the viewership goes up so that way they can justify having two people on. It's a whole convoluted situation that didn't make sense to any of us, but like I said, Reichel drops in. He usually drops in on Fridays now because, as he said last week, he was already dressed from doing Morning Wood, and then he does his college football show with Steen on Friday afternoons after this show. So that's when he tends to drop in. But that covers the upcoming stuff. So we'll do a little housekeeping here real quick before we move on to today's action. And that takes us to, of course, our sponsor from, of course, Caesar Sportsbook has a great deal for all you first-time users. Get up to $1,250 in free bet insurance. make sure you download the app today. Basically, if you fund your bet and it loses, Caesars will make it right up to $1,250, so you can bet again. Of course, always check the age limits in your state. In Wyoming and New Hampshire, that is 11. And always bet responsibly. We don't want to hear that you literally bet the farm and lost because you thought that. I'll just go back to Andrew's point that the Knicks and Pistons would stay under 209 in preseason basketball, and somehow some guy hit a three-quarter court shot at the buzzer to end up at 211. And if you can't get enough of the picks that we talk about on the show, and you need even more picks, you can, of course, get my premium bets every day. They're down in the link in the show box below. I usually send out 7 different parlays every day, along with individual single game bets as well. And also check out the Winners and Winers website and the YouTube channel for free picks all day long. You can get picks from Reichel and Steen and Dave Delano, Arthur Reyes, and the rest of the guys that don't have shows. I like Higgs. Higgs is a good guy. Illinois minus 3.5. Yeah, I mean, Iowa is terrible offensively. I mean, they've gone back to beyond the 3 yards in a cloud of dust mentality. Petrus is not a great quarterback. Their run game hasn't been great. They punted on their first 5 possessions against Michigan. And they just looked miserable. And let's face it, they're not a very good football team. And that takes us to today's action. Also, just a quick update on the one game going on. They've now gone to the second inning at Globe Life Field. The score, the Yankees 2, the Rangers 2. Another young guy for the Yankees, Oswaldo Peraza, hit a homer in the second for the Yankees to tie the game after Tyone gave up 2 in the bottom of the first on a 2-out, 2-run single by Josh Jung. So 2-2 in the second. Looks like it could be a high-scoring game at Globe Life Field in the opener here. They're already, like I said, they're already at 4 runs. The total for that game was 7, and the line closed at even money, which is strange, considering it was Gray and Tyone. Like I said, Garrett Cole and TBD in the nightcap. Hey, DE, anytime you want to go and yell at Michael or Keith or any of those guys, feel free. Maybe somebody will listen. Andrew said Tom and Giselle are calling it quits, leading to the fun meme saying, who's going to get custody of who gives a damn? Because, these things obviously happen, but what can you do? Brady, we thought that he was probably at the end of the rope last year, and he decided to come back. And without an offensive line to block for him, he's in trouble anyway. But with that said, we'll move on to today's action. Start with 2 for the money, and we will start with the Angels and the A's. Talked about these 2 teams yesterday. The Angels were up 4-0. And then promptly turned around and blew it because, hey, why not go to the bullpen, right? Never mind that Sandoval threw 6 scoreless innings. Let's bring in the scrubs. And that's exactly what they proceeded to do. They gave up 2 in the 8th. They gave up 2 in the 9th. They gave up 1 in the 10th and lost 5-4. Your Los Angeles Angels, everybody. And then people wonder why they say that Mike Trout and Ohtani are being wasted with that franchise. You can't even beat the last place team. After you led 4-0 after 7. This one has Michael Lorenzen going as Cole Irvin. I like Irvin, except for the fact that all he throws is crap. He's basically the Eddie Harris of Major League Baseball, as far as, he doesn't throw anything with any kind of speed to it. The A's are just 27-52 at home on the year. Irvin, struggled in his last start against the Angels. 3 runs on 9 hits, a walk and 6 strikeouts in 4 innings, took the loss. He also lost his previous start against the Angels before that back on August 8th. He had 1 run on 5 hits, no walks, and 6 strikeouts in 8 in a 1-0 defeat. Lorenzen's been decent. He struck out 21 in his last 3 starts. Good reason why I got him on the K-prop list at the end. Struck out 8 against the A's in his last outing, went 5 innings, 1 run, none earned, 3 hits, 3 walks, 8 strikeouts. A's won 4-1 in that one. That was last Wednesday. Cleveland over Kansas City. You talk about another team that struggled a bit yesterday. Cleveland had chances to put Kansas City away, lost in 10. This one is Cal Quantrill going against Daniel Lynch. Yeah, I like that one, Gio. Like I said, the Raiders are no match for the Chiefs. The Giants don't have a quarterback. Houston played good for about 17 minutes against the Chargers, and that was the third quarter and the opening few minutes of the fourth. But you got to play 60 minutes to win this league. And the Jets, just because they came back to beat Pittsburgh, I'm not sold on them beating a team like Miami. Who will probably blitz Wilson relentlessly and force him to make quick decisions, which I'm not necessarily sold on that he can do. In this one, Cal Quantrill going for the Guardians, and we've talked about it millions of times. When Quantrill pitches, Cleveland's bats show up. You look at his numbers this season. He's made 31 starts on the year. I'm just going to pull this up. He's averaging 5.68 runs of support. He's gotten at least 5 runs of support in, 18 of his 31 starts. If you just even go down to 4 runs, he's gotten 4 runs or more in 22 of his 31 outings this season. That's a big reason why he's 14-5. He's 10-0 in his last 10 decisions going back to July 11th. In that stretch, he's made 16 starts. Cleveland has won 15 of them. He's got a 3.01 ERA in that stretch over 92 2/3 innings. Kansas City, Lynch has his moments, but the Royals are going nowhere fast. Cleveland's getting ready for the playoffs. I like Quantrill in this one. The Braves have a chance where they can lock up the division. I don't necessarily like the fact that it's Odorizzi going on the mound. I really wish Spencer Strider wasn't on the shelf. Braxton Garrett going for the Marlins, but like I said, the Marlins scored 4 runs yesterday. That might be all they score in the series because we've talked about the issues they've had at the plate all season long. I just don't have faith in them doing it here. And then Arizona and Milwaukee, a nerfy, like we talked about, Gallen, a 127 earned run average since the All-Star break. Arizona has been punchless against a lot of pitchers in the second half of the season. Lauer pitches pretty well early in games. I expect that this one will be scoreless after 1. Yeah, Lauer being a lefty, Arizona has one of the worst productions against left-handed pitchers in the majors. Look for that one to be 0-0 after the opening inning, making that bet a winner for you. That takes us to 4 for the show. This is an interesting one here. The Twins over the White Sox in a battle of 2 teams that had a chance to win the AL Central and then decided they didn't want to play anymore. It's Josh Winder going against Giolito. Remember a couple of years ago when Giolito was good? What happened to those days? Because you look and he comes in, he's 10-9 on the year, but his ERA is 5. His whip is 1.474. He's given up 24 homers and 154 and 2/3 innings. Those just aren't the kind of numbers for a guy that had 3 straight finishes in the top 12 in the Cy Young race from 2019 and 2021. And his ERA jumped up 1.5 from last year. It was 3.53 in 2021. It's 5 now. I don't like the White Sox. I know they're at 500. I know they don't have Tony La Russa, who announced yesterday that he's stepping down with a year still on his contract. But still, let's face it, the White Sox, not a good team. The Twins aren't great either. A win, Mike, a win or a Mets loss will clinch the NL East for the Braves. They're a game and a half up. They have 2 left. The Mets have 3. So a win would give them 101 wins, and that would, since they won the season series from the Mets, even if the Mets were to sweep Washington and get to 101, that would give Atlanta the division title. So it's a win or a Mets loss. But with the Mets playing Washington, you kind of have to lean towards Atlanta, trying to take care of business themselves. Kansas City and Cleveland, a nerfy there. We talked about Quantrill getting a bunch of runs. He's also been good at shutting down the opposition. Like I said, a 3.01 ERA in his last 16 starts. Lynch, like we said, he's been up and down, but he's a lefty, and Cleveland doesn't generate much of a offensive attack against left-handed pitching. So this could be a prime chance for Lynch to actually have a good first inning. He might fade after that. But I look for it to be scoreless after 1. Cleveland can always pile on against that beleaguered Kansas City bullpen. We talked about the Rays and the Red Sox. It's Springs versus Rich Hill. Tampa Bay has to win and get some help from Seattle losing to Detroit if they hope to jump out of playing Cleveland in the opening round and moving into playing Toronto in the wild card round of the playoffs. I don't like Rich Hill. I don't like Boston's lineup. Tampa Bay, they let one slip away yesterday. I don't think they're going to make the same mistake today. And then we talked about the Diamondbacks. The Brewers have nothing to play for now. They are eliminated. The Diamondbacks haven't had anything to play for a while, but Gallen is a better pitcher than Lauer. And Milwaukee's had to use a ton of their bullpen in the last couple of days. I'll take Gallen at his 1.27 ERA since the break to get the win in that contest. And that takes us to the shot in the dark. A lot of good stuff in here today. You look at Jose Ramirez, over 1.5 total bases. He had a couple hits yesterday for Cleveland. Arguably, he's been their most consistent hitter. You'd like to think that, maybe he can get some pop going in the bat again because he hasn't driven the ball out of the yard as much as you would like. He's only got 1 homer in his last 10. But there's always the potential for one in the gap. You look at Ramirez has somewhat quietly got 42 doubles, 5 triples, 29 homers, 122 RBIs on the year. And, he's not a guy that's just going to go up there and whiff. He's at least going to make contact a good amount of the time. He's only got 81 strikeouts and 592 at-bats. So that's always a plus. Dansby Swanson. Swanson's been on a roll of late, even in yesterday's losing effort. Knocked out a couple of hits for Atlanta. Just trying to pull it up here. I keep so many tabs open that it's hard to keep track of which one I'm looking at. Swanson, yesterday, he had 2 hits. He's got 6 hits in his last 4 games. In that span, he's homered 3 times. He's got 16 total bases in the last 4. And playing in Miami, it's not that hard to find the gap there. So that's something to look forward to. Whit Merrifield's been on a roll for the Blue Jays, had 3 more hits in last night's game. It's a pretty high price probably because of, you basically have to look for 2 hits because of the fact that Merrifield isn't necessarily a big power guy. But he has homered, I think, 5 times since coming over in that trade from Kansas City. He seems like he's starting to stake his claim to taking over second base, which will maybe move Espinal into a bench role. But Merrifield in his last 6 games has 11 hits. He had 7 total bases in the game against Boston on Sunday. He had 3 more hits yesterday. So he's been on a tear, and for a guy that hits low in the order, that's always a good thing. Ohtani over 1.5 total bases. Basically, you can put it Ohtani or Trout. Trout had a rough day yesterday. Went over 5. Ohtani was 1 for 4. But it's the A's, and Irvin, throws a lot of stuff that's easy to hit the zone. The Giants over the Padres. San Diego has nothing to play for here. It's Rodon against Manaea. Let's face it, Manaea has been terrible of late. I'm seriously wondering, will San Diego use him out of the bullpen in the opening round of the playoffs, because he's fallen off a cliff. I mean, he's 7-9. His ERA is over 5. You look at his recent outings. He was decent against the Dodgers in his last start or his last appearance because he came in out of the bullpen. He came in out of the pen against Colorado. He started but gave up 3 runs in 3 2/3. He just hasn't looked right since the All-Star break, and I know some of that is because he's faced the Dodgers a few times, and the Dodgers have just beaten the brakes off him all season. But with Musgrove and Darvish, and then do you consider Snell or Clevenger as the number 3 starter? Where does that leave Manaea in the postseason? Gallen, over 7.5 strikeouts. We talked about how well he's pitched in the second half. Over 7.5 plus 134. Over 8.5 is plus 255. With Milwaukee's lineup and the way that they strike out, it wouldn't be a stretch to see him get to 9 or 10. Springs over 5.5 strikeouts plus 126. Over 6.5 is plus 255. Springs is that guy who you look at in the box score and you're like, who the hell's this guy? And then you realize that, he's given you 5 or 6 good innings and struck out 6 or 7 guys and kept your team in the game. He's quietly put together, a good season. He's 9-4. His ERA is 2.45. He averages better than a strikeout an inning. So let's face it, he's a solid bet. Same thing here. We talked about the Diamondbacks and the Brewers. Lauer over 5.5 strikeouts plus 110. Over 6.5 is plus 220. Arizona has been striking out, I think, about 1 out of every 4 at bats over the past month. Lauer's a lefty. Arizona doesn't do well against left-handed pitching. He can probably ring up some strikeouts, and he needs to give the Brewers some length with the bullpen being gassed at this point. Lorenzen's facing the A's. We've talked about how Oakland is a terrible hitting team. Over 5.5 strikeouts plus 200. Over 6.5 plus 420. And like we said, he struck out 8 in 5 innings against this Oakland team in his last start. And then, Feltner over 4.5 strikeouts plus 158. Over 5.5 is plus 340. 5 of the last 6 Dodgers or left-handers to face the Dodgers have struck out at least 5. The only one who missed was Urena, who struck out 4. So I'm comfortable giving Feltner a crack there and seeing what he can do. If you bet all those on the money line, or in the case of the props, the one number that's there, and they all come through, $100 would cash you $589,293.03. If you bet the Giants on the run line along with all the others, then it comes through just short of $750,000. Talk about a nice day at the window there. And if you went with the alternative K props, which is the second number for Gallen and Springs and Lauer and Lorenzen and Feltner, and those came through $8,170.46 on $100. All in all, you can't complain. But with that wraps up the show for Tuesday. We will be back tomorrow with the final day of the regular season for Major League Baseball. We can probably get a better look at how the first round of the playoffs are going to unfold. Talk about that. We'll talk about the SMU UCF game being the lone college game on the football slate for Wednesday. Maybe we'll look ahead to the Thursday night game for the NFL. Maybe we'll talk about the look ahead a little bit to the NBA. We'll look to the NHL. We'll always, of course, look at your questions and your comments and anything you guys want to talk about. Nathan, under 5, are you talking about in the first 5 innings? Or are you talking about for the team or for the game total? Because I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but 5 might be a little bit too low of a number. I see that it was set at 7 last I looked. First 5, I lean towards the under because then you're not working back to dealing with the bullpens. But first 5, I could see going under as well. That's probably at 4. I hadn't looked at it since early this morning. Let me just take a quick look, just see what the first 5 number is. I'm guessing it's 4 or 3.5 or something along those lines. Milwaukee. There we go. Let's see. First 5, 3.5. I can probably still see it going. Oh yeah, under 5. I think 5 might be stretching it slightly. I don't see it getting to 7. I can see it being maybe a 4-2 game. But that's probably about it. I don't see this being some massive game where they suddenly, batter the pitching staffs on either side. But like I said, that'll do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you on Wednesday. So hopefully everything works out for you guys on your bets, and we will catch you tomorrow. So long, everybody.